Emily Parker learned how loneliness could live inside a marriage long before she ever said it out loud. It wasn't sudden. It didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, settling into the corners of her days. It came in the pauses after she spoke, when no one answered. It came in the space between her reaching out and Daniel not noticing. 5 years earlier, she had married Daniel Parker believing love was something that grew with time. They had met in Chicago, both young and hopeful, both certain that choosing each other was enough. Daniel was smart, focused, and steady. Emily loved his calm. She loved how safe he made the future feel. But safety, she would learn, was not the same as warmth. They moved to a quiet suburb outside Portland for Daniel's job. The house was clean, modern, and filled with light. Emily decorated it carefully. Photos on the walls, soft blankets on the couch, candles on the dining table. She tried to make it feel like a place where hearts lived, not just bodies. Daniel noticed none of it. He worked long hours and brought his tiredness home with him. His voice stayed polite, distant, controlled. He kissed her cheek in passing. He asked practical questions. He answered messages while she spoke. Emily told herself. This was normal. This was adulthood. Love didn't always look exciting, she thought. It looked responsible. Still. Something in her waited. She waited for him to ask how she felt, not just what she did. She waited for him to sit beside her without checking his phone. She waited for his eyes to soften when he looked at her. The waiting became a habit. Every morning, Emily woke before Daniel. She made coffee. She watched the steam rise and imagined conversations that never happened. When Daniel came downstairs, he thanked her, kissed her forehead, and left for work already thinking about something else. At night, they shared a bed, but not a world. Daniel fell asleep quickly. Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering. When she had started feeling like a guest in her own life, she tried to fix it. She planned weekend trips. Daniel canceled them for work. She cooked his favorite meals. He ate quietly and went back to his laptop. She reached for his hand during movies. He pulled away without realizing it. None of it was cruel. It made it harder. There was no clear reason to be unhappy. No clear reason to leave. Only a dull ache that followed her everywhere. Emily began walking more, just to feel something move inside her. She walked through neighborhoods, through parks, through rainy streets that smelled of wet leaves and coffee shops. One afternoon, after a long walk that left her feet tired and her mind heavy, she passed an animal shelter she had never noticed before. She almost kept walking. Then she heard it, not barking, not noise, silence. She stopped and looked through the glass. Inside, dogs waited. Some jumped, some slept. Some slept, some stared with hope that felt almost painful to see. Emily didn't know why she went in. She told herself it was just curiosity. Inside, the air smelled clean but sad. She walked slowly past the cages, reading names, avoiding eye contact. Then she reached the end of the row and saw him. He was older, medium-sized, brown eyes, gray. Around his muzzle, he sat quietly, watching her without moving. The tag said, Buddy, age 8. Emily knelt down. Buddy stood up and walked to the gate. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He rested his head gently against the bars. Like he trusted her without reason. Emily felt her chest tighten. She pressed her fingers through the metal. Buddy leaned into her touch, slow and calm, like he had been waiting a long time for this exact moment. Something inside her broke open. She didn't cry. Not then. She smiled, shaky and surprised, and whispered, Hi. The shelter worker told her Buddy had been returned twice. Too quiet. Too old. Not playful enough. Emily nodded, listening, but already knowing. She signed the papers without calling Daniel. When she brought Buddy home, rain was falling again. Buddy stepped inside carefully, sniffing the floor, the walls, the air. Emily watched him, heart racing. Daniel came home an hour later. What's this? He asked, stopping in the doorway. A dog, Emily said. He frowned slightly. You didn't ask, I know. Daniel sighed. rubbing his forehead. As long as he doesn't ruin anything. Buddy sat beside Emily, calm and still. That night, Buddy slept near the bed, close enough that Emily could hear his breathing. It was steady, real, alive. She slept better than she had in months. The next morning, Buddy followed her into the kitchen and sat at her feet while she made coffee. When she dropped a spoon, he looked up. When she laughed softly at herself, his tail moved once. Slow and gentle, Emily felt seen. Days passed quickly after that. Buddy waited by the door when she left. When she came back, his whole body leaned toward her, quiet joy in every movement. He listened when she spoke, tilting his head. Eyes focused like her words mattered. Emily started talking again. She talked while cooking, while cleaning, while sitting on the floor beside Buddy, running her fingers through his fur. She told him about her days, her thoughts, her memories. He never interrupted. He never looked away. Daniel noticed changes, but misunderstood them. "You seem busy lately," he said one night. Emily smiled politely. "I'm just happier." Daniel nodded, already distracted. The words stayed with her. Happier. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she felt that way. One evening, Emily came home exhausted after a difficult day. Daniel was late again. She dropped her bag and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Buddy jumped up beside her and rested, his head on her lap. Emily froze. The touch was simple, warm, present. Her throat tightened. Tears came before she could stop them. Buddy stayed still, breathing slow, letting her cry without trying to fix anything. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel alone while hurting. She realized then what had been missing. Not love in words. Love in presence. Weeks passed. Emily changed without meaning to. She stood straighter. She smiled more. She stopped waiting for Daniel to fill the quiet spaces. Those spaces were no longer empty. Daniel felt it too, though he couldn't name it. Emily no longer asked for his attention. No longer waited up for him. No longer tried to pull him closer. One night, as they sat at opposite ends of the couch, Daniel glanced at her. "You're different," he said. Emily looked at him calmly. "I finally feel heard." Daniel didn't know what to say. Buddy lay between them, eyes half closed, breathing slow and steady. And somewhere deep inside Emily, a truth was for and quiet, clear and impossible to ignore. Her dog had done in weeks what her husband hadn't done in 5 years, and she was no longer sure she could go back to the way things were. Emily Parker had begun to feel alive again, not because her marriage had changed, but because Buddy had shown her what being truly seen felt like. In the mornings, she woke up to a soft nudge on her arm. Buddy's warm nose pressed against her, reminding her she was no longer invisible. The world outside the house felt sharper, brighter, filled with small joys she had forgotten. Birds sang differently. Coffee tasted richer. The air smelled fresher. She started noticing the things Daniel had stopped seeing years ago, the way sunlight caught the kitchen floor, the way flowers leaned toward the light, the little cracks in the sidewalk that caught puddles after rain. Buddy became her constant companion, following her to every room, curling at her feet during work calls, and resting his head on her lap when she read. He didn't demand attention, but he gave it freely, fully, without distraction or distraction. Emily began to understand that she hadn't been missing Daniel. She had been missing someone who simply cared enough to be present, and Buddy filled that space effortlessly. Each night, when Daniel came home late from work, Emily would already be on the couch, reading or listening to music. Buddy curled next to her. Daniel would glance over, half smile, and retreat to his routine. He didn't ask what had changed or what she was thinking. He didn't notice the shift in her energy. That, Emily realized, was not his fault entirely. He had been consistent in his patterns, but it clarified something for her. She had been waiting for someone who could not meet her where she needed to be met. One evening, Emily and Buddy went for a long walk in the neighborhood park. The air was cool, tinged with the first hints of spring. Buddy trotted ahead, stopping occasionally to sniff the ground, always returning to her side. Emily felt lighter with every step, the weight of years of quiet disappointment loosening from her shoulders. She laughed aloud when Buddy chased a squirrel halfway up a tree and barked indignantly at its audacity. People passing by smiled. She felt alive. On the way home, they stopped at a small cafe near the corner of the street. Buddy's tail wagged as a man stepped out with a cup of coffee. He crouched down and asked if he could pet Buddy. Emily watched as Buddy leaned into the stranger's hand, then looked up at her, eyes full of trust and joy. "I'm Michael," the man said, smiling. "He's a good dog." "He really is," Emily replied, her voice lighter than it had been in years. "I don't know who rescued who." Michael laughed. "Seems like he rescued both of you." Something in her chest warmed unexpectedly. A flutter of curiosity, a reminder that the heart could still open. Emily realized she hadn't felt this in a long time, not excitement, not possibility, not the gentle pull of hope. She hadn't realized how lonely she had been until she experienced this small spark. Back at home, Buddy curled on the rug near her chair while Emily prepared dinner. She reflected on the weeks that had passed. Her life had changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. She was more present, more attentive to her own feelings, more aware of what made her happy. And she owed it all to Buddy, not to Daniel. Not to circumstance, but to a quiet, patient dog who had reminded her that love wasn't about grand gestures or constant attention. It was about presence, warmth, and noticing. Daniel started to sense the shift, though he couldn't quite articulate it. He tried in small ways to connect, tasking about her day, suggesting a movie, tempting casual conversation, but Emily had changed. She no longer looked to him for validation. She no longer needed his attention to feel complete. She smiled, politely, answered briefly, and returned to her own life. One evening, as Daniel worked late again, Emily sat on the couch with Buddy. She absent-mindedly stroked his fur and thought about the years she had spent waiting. The meals shared in silence, the evenings spent longing for connection that never came. Tears threatened again, but this time they were different. They were not of sorrow, but of release. She had let go of the expectation that Daniel could meet her emotionally. She had found her own comfort, her own joy, her own love. Buddy lifted his head and looked at her, eyes calm and steady. Emily laughed softly, the sound full of relief. "I think I finally understand," she whispered. "Can't fix everything, but you can make someone feel safe, seen, and loved just by being there." As weeks turned into months, Emily's confidence grew. She began redecorating parts of the house in ways that reflected her tastes rather than Daniel's. She wore clothes she liked, not clothes she thought he would appreciate. She started going out with friends she hadn't seen in years. Each small act was a step toward reclaiming herself, toward building a life that felt hers. The tension with Daniel grew as the distance widened. He noticed the change in her demeanor, her confidence, her independence. One night he finally asked Emily, "Where are we going with this? You seem different?" Emily looked at him with clarity. "I'm finally here," she said. "I've been waiting to feel alive. And I realized I can't do that with someone who doesn't notice me." Daniel was quiet. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. There was a pause, heavy with understanding, the kind that only comes when people accept the truth they've been avoiding. A few weeks later, they agreed to separate. It was peaceful, without shouting or blame, but full of the quiet realization that sometimes love is not enough when it is unbalanced. When one heart gives more than the other can return. The morning Daniel moved out, Buddy stayed close to Emily. He rested his head on her lap, eyes full of gentle reassurance. Emily felt a profound gratitude for the dog who had quietly guided her to this point. He hadn't just comforted her, he had shown her how to love herself again. Life began to shift in unexpected ways. Emily started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding joy in helping other animals find homes. She spent evenings exploring new neighborhoods, discovering cafes, bookstores, and parks she hadn't noticed before. Buddy was always at her side, a reminder that love could be quiet, steady, and transformative. One sunny afternoon, Emily and Buddy walked along a riverfront in Seattle. The water sparkled, children laughed in the distance, and the city hummed with life. Buddy's leash tightened as he pulled toward a small dog playing with its owner. Emily struck up a conversation with the owner, a man named Michael. They talked about dogs, parks, and favorite walks. Buddy approached Michael, sniffed his hand, then returned to Emily with a wagging tail. Emily felt a connection forming, not a replacement for her past, but a new possibility. Her heart, once closed off, began to open in careful, hopeful increments. She realized she had missed the simple pleasure of connection, the warmth of attention, the excitement of shared laughter. Evenings became her favorite time. She and Buddy would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. She reflected on her journey, the loneliness, the quiet ache, the small moments of realization. And she understood that happiness wasn't about waiting for someone to change or meet your expectations. It was about noticing the love and presence around you, nurturing it, and letting it guide you toward a fuller life. Buddy had done something extraordinary. He had taught Emily that love didn't have to be loud or dramatic. It didn't have to come with apologies or grand gestures. It could be steady, patient, and unconditional. And in teaching her that, Buddy had achieved something Daniel never could. He had shown her how to feel again. Emily smiled as she watched Buddy sleep peacefully by her side that night. For the first time in years, she felt complete, not because someone else had given her attention, but because she had learned to accept and cherish the presence of someone who simply cared fully and without conditions. And in that presence, she had found a new life, a new joy, and a new beginning. She knew the future was uncertain. She didn't know what new people, experiences, or challenges would come. But she had learned a powerful truth. Love could arrive in unexpected forms. And those forms could heal, transform, and guide you toward the life you deserved. Buddy had not just been a dog. He had been a teacher, a companion, and a mirror reflecting the love Emily had been missing from herself. And with him by her side, she knew she could face anything with an open heart, ready to embrace the joy, connection, and beauty that life still had to offer. From that day forward, Emily lived differently. She noticed the small things. She cherished the quiet moments. She smiled at strangers. She laughed at mistakes. She gave herself permission to feel, to hope, to love. And through it all, Buddy remained her constant reminder that the heart could always learn to feel again, even after years of waiting. For Emily Parker, life had begun anew, not because she had found what she was looking for in a person, but because she had found it in the simple, steady, unwavering presence of a dog who loved her without expectation. And in that love, she discovered the courage to open her heart to a world she had long forgotten could be so warm, so alive, and so full of possibility.